I have the pleasure and the honor to welcome here Maaianne Knuth. She came directly from deep down in Africa. She is in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is one of these African regions where life is hard. And in some way, to keep their right on as a human being between the traditional way to live in the African communities, which is perhaps not so much open for an individual striving in life, and in tension to this, the very modern way which also is present in Africa. In this situation, Maaianne Knuth is leading an initiative, a kind of leadership village, where with the people from the African ground, she tries to build up a kind of, let's say, individual sovereignty to stay in a way with oneself that one can join then and to be a member of a new social gathering. And when we found Maaianne, because we didn't know before, and we phoned, and she asked me, "Why do you ask me? I'm not an expert in biodynamics. I'm not an expert in associative economics. Why do you ask me?" And my answer has been exactly while actually you are more fundamentally in the African context and as a woman active to build up this kind of inner strength and inner light in each one of your initiative, of the people in your initiative, which is the base for all healthy behaving and acting in the social reality of nowadays. So thank you very much to be with us, and please, it's your turn.
Need to get my microphone sorted. One second. There we go. I hope it works with the dress. So thank you for inviting me. I feel very honored. I feel very privileged to be here today. Anthroposophy has come into my life only a few years ago. And so when I first was invited, as Willie said, I was like, I think you've invited the wrong person. And then when I realized that the invitation was genuine and I might have something to contribute to the beginning of this conference, I got very excited because this is a place I've read and heard much about. So it's an honor to be with you here today. And my offering and my topic is around personal sovereignty and how to awaken it in Africa, so that we can work together generatively. I think the focus of the conference, how do we work together economically on the land? I won't touch on that in my contribution, but more how do we as individuals from Europe, but for me particularly in Africa, stand in a way that we trust ourselves in who we are, so that we can begin to find our way to build, to create, to find income, and to find ways of moving forward. And as Uli said, my experience is that Oftentimes people have come to Africa. Oftentimes people think of Africa as the lost continent, the dark continent, and they come with technical solutions. And in that way actually make the situation worse, because they come to a people that have been told for so long that you are less than us. You don't have the same intelligence, capacity, but we are here to help you and we'll give you some solutions. And so actually that's compounding a problem that is already deep there. So what I've found in my work and in my experience in Zimbabwe over the past 15 years has been that what is needed actually has to do with the inner, invisible ecology of the human being, how to support that to grow, my own and my relationships. And that's what I'd like to speak about with you here this afternoon. I'm going to check my time. So I'm going to tell my story and then add some reflections and perspectives. Knuth, as you can hear, is not an African name. I'm half Danish. My father was Danish and my mother Zimbabwean. They met in Kenya, and that is where I was born. After a few years in Kenya, they moved to Zimbabwe. We moved to Denmark, and that's where I grew up until about 12, and then back to Zimbabwe. So I only entered Africa at 12, but I think fell in love immediately. My soul definitely feels more Zimbabwean. I studied my university back in Denmark, and that's where I began to have this sense of dissonance. So as a young person, growing up first in Denmark, then in Zimbabwe, then back in Denmark, and then beginning to see that the stories and the lens of the world on this place that I called home and this place that I loved so much, something was off. We were not looking through the same lenses. I often use this example, and I do it humbly, but my Zimbabwean grandmother lives in an African village on less than $2 a day, doesn't have any formal education, a little bit of primary school, doesn't speak English. And so in the story of the world, this is a poor woman. This is maybe even a problem to be solved. What do we do with these poor, illiterate human beings? And my experience of this woman was of someone so rich in roots, connection with the land, with her animals, with her family, large family, loved by her children. Strong woman, and not considering herself poor, actually. I think that's coming with the later generations of people from Africa. And then I looked at my grandparents in Denmark, also beautiful and strong individuals, but in so many ways actually really poor, so materially rich. And the last years of my grandmother's life, in particular in Denmark, unable to find meaning. No family around her. Her husband had passed away, and her only son had left for Africa. And so I looked at that and I thought, what is wealth? What is richness? And so that has been a big part of my journey, and I think being in a bridge between two worlds and not being able to align what people are saying wealth and richness is with my own experience. And so I finished studying in Denmark, and when I was 30, decided to move back home to Zimbabwe. I'd been offered a great job in a corporation. I studied business and economics, and decided actually I had to go back home, what I considered home. And the reason was a beautiful experience that I had. So when I turned 30, I invited everyone I knew, and because of work I had done, I had friends from many different countries, and so I invited, I'm actually going to move. I invited all my friends, and I said, come to Africa and celebrate life. Not my birthday, celebrate life with me for 1 week. And about 40 people joined me from all over the world, but primarily Europe and North America. And we had a week in Zimbabwe. We rented these overland trucks and drove around. And the highlight for me of our week together was 24 hours in my grandparents' village. And I was a little bit nervous because most of my friends were white, and the village was obviously all black, no electricity, out in the middle of nowhere, no running water. And it was the most exquisite meeting of human beings. It was 40 foreigners with 200 villagers, the whole night. The women, the African women, singing their church choir songs, the men playing the mbira, this little thumb piano, the young boys drumming, conversations under the trees. And it gave me this experience of, this is the richness, this is the wealth, this community. It was like a fabric of something palpable, alive, that my friends were able to drop into. And they said, for them, this had been an enormous, like a significant moment in their life, a shift. Everything we've read and seen on the news, realizing this is just one part of the story, and there's so much more here. And it's true, as you said, sometimes in this communal setting, it's hard for me to find my way and my path and my I. And yet, for us to just deny the gift of that community, to just say it's simplistic, would be a huge error. And so I returned from Denmark to support people to reclaim a sense of pride in who they were and what they had. I think the biggest, I think the biggest challenge, perhaps bigger even than the collective mind of the African cultures, is the colonial legacy. And so the colonial legacy that came in, white people in charge, black people below, not able to vote, not able to, and still, even as things have changed, I think in many African countries it's different, but in Southern Africa, even though we have independence and the whites have given over power in all the positions that really count, in the lodges, in the really big companies, white boss, and the black people do what they're told, do what they're told, do what they're told. And of course, I'm generalizing, I'm exaggerating, but it's still, as a general rule, there's such a discrepancy, such a discrepancy. So my work became to create a learning village. My parents had bought a farm in Zimbabwe, and so I came back with this assumption, belief, unquestionable certainty that people here have most of the wisdom and the resources that they need, but they've been covered over or let go of or forgotten. But as we come back together, remembering, celebrating, honoring what's here, we can begin to build on it. Because how can I move into the future if I deny my past and the only thing I think is I'm poor, I am nothing? So Kufunda became just that. And in fact, recently at Kufunda, and I'll tell you a bit more about Kufunda, we've started, inspired by Angela from Sekhem, we started last year to do tech study. And one of the things I read in How to Know Higher Worlds, and it keeps coming back, it seems like an essential part is, how do I meet the other with reverence and wonder? How do I meet the other without judgment? Because the moment I judge, I've already closed a whole world of possibility. And so that, in a sense, I think is the core principle of Kufunda, to meet the communities, to meet the widows, to meet the orphans, to meet the people that we work with that reverence, wonder, and honor. and in that process begin to discover that there's actually so much more than what we realized, so much more capacity, so much more potential. And it's almost like, I find the words for it, and I realized it's actually more of a movement. So it's a movement of someone that's a little bit like this, maybe partly from a collective culture, maybe partly from a colonial legacy, but I'm a little bit like this. And then in this process of being met with reverence, with curiosity, with love, it's like a sun that comes, and I begin, I'm not quite sure, but and I begin to find myself. I begin to feel myself in a way that maybe I hadn't even allowed myself yet. I begin to find my ground. I begin to breathe more deeply. I begin to trust myself. And sometimes it comes with a lot of anger. Like, what? Like sometimes it comes with anger at the white people, or my parents, or my husband. And I won't swear, but like, wah! But ultimately that's just a release. That's just a release because I'm coming home. I'm coming home. And I am a magnificent human being. My skin is black, and I am a magnificent human being. In Zimbabwe, we have what's called O-levels. It's not quite the end of high school, but it's like a thing that just most of our students fail it. About 70% of students, kind of 2 years before the final exam of high school, O-levels, 70% of our youth in the last many years fail O-level. So in addition to this, I'm poor, I don't have a lot, I just failed my O-level. Oh my goodness, I am really stupid. And then they go home and they have to, I loved listening to you guys, but I didn't even do my O-levels. And then I go home and I have to help my parents with their land or find a way to earn an income and to make my way. How is that possible? Most of the people that live and work at Kufunda failed their O-levels. And the journey for them to discover just what capacity they have when they're trusted and given space and support to grow has been remarkable. So I'll just offer a few examples. And I'm realizing I haven't actually said what Kufunda is. So let me do that first. So Kufunda is a learning village on my parents' farm. My father's passed away. It's a place that's built like an African village. It looks like an African village, African mud huts with thatched roofing, many clusters of huts. And it's a place where we live, those of us that live at Kufunda, about 40, 50 of us with children. And where we are learning. So what do we know about self-reliance? What do we know about how to create healthy, vibrant community? And much of what we know comes from our culture. Much of what we know comes from friends that are coming in from outside. We've got friends here as well that are joining us in April this year to teach us our first workshop in biodynamics. So it's not that we want to close ourselves to the world, but we want to work from a place of equality and being met. So we're learning, and as we learn, we're inviting others in to learn with us. We host workshops for rural communities. Come and remember who you are. Storytelling is an enormous part of our work. In the stories about the past, stories about the present, people begin to find their voice, begin to realize that I'm not alone. And that movement I made begin to stand a little taller. Circle practice, which comes from our tradition and many indigenous traditions. A talking piece, a circle, and the piece is passed. And the first time one woman that's never spoken in a big crowd will say, I take the piece. And it comes back, and she begins to find her voice, and she begins to speak. Practical work. How can we talk about how our ancestors used to till the land? We have to do it. Practical work. doing it together, figuring it out. Embodiment. The African doesn't live just from here up. I don't think any human beings do, but somehow in Europe that's become a little bit where we go. I know not necessarily here. But so we do a lot of embodiment, conscious dance, where I have to be really present in my body, and I move and I dance, and the dance as a prayer. It's not eurythmy, but I think there's linkages and similarities. Aikido, a martial art. We're not very good at it, but we've had a few teachers come, and we continue on our own. And again, like how do I align myself? So physical embodiment, storytelling while we make clay pots, making masks of mud and talking about the masks that I carry in my heart. So in many ways, I think some of what we're doing is, working with different dimensions, not just on the land and not just in the head, but bringing the whole body in. So I was going to share a few stories of people. Sketiwe was a young woman when I started Kufunda, and she was my mother's maid. We still have maids in Zimbabwe. So she was, cleaning the floor and washing the dishes, and she never really talked. And when we did our first youth leadership program, she signed up. And we had a selection process, and she did very well. People would come, and they were doing team building things, and we were watching them, and she did amazingly well. And so she was invited to join this 3-month program. And my mother said, "Why is Sketiwe joining the program? She's my maid. I thought it was a leadership program." And I said, "Well, she seems ready, and anyone can be a leader." I think actually at Kufunda, one of the things we believe that a leader is anyone who's ready and willing to serve. Because out of that impulse comes the continuing stepping forward. And so Sketiwe today, 15 years on, has found that her passion, her deep, soul, like she was born with it, I'm sure, is to support other African women to come out of their bondage, I would call it. And so she is leading our women's empowerment programs. We run, I think, the most beautiful programs for women to find themselves, and she's the leader of this. And snapshot Sketiwe, young, insecure woman, snapshot Sketiwe 15 years later with a passion. And she said to me the other day, she said, "Maaianne, I want to thank you, because I know now that when I die, I'm not dying yet, but when I die, I know I will have fulfilled my life's purpose, because I'm living it right now." And that, for me, is what Kufunda is about. Yes, we teach permaculture and hopefully one day biodynamics. Yes, we do eco-building, we do herbs, and I'm not belittling all of those. Really, that's how we then, move forward. But for me, our work is about that spark that everyone has, but maybe they're sleeping. Another friend of mine spoke of Africa as the place where the sleeping giants. And so I really have the sense there's so much power. There's so much power that could also nourish and give something to Europe, to the rest of the world. And somehow, as Africans, we're needing to re-find our roots that were cut during colonialism, and find the way for each one of us, Sketiwe, others, to step up in their power, still with their community. One more story of a person, and then I'll begin to weave to an end. Anna Miranda was a woman from Rusape, a community about 2 hours from where we are at work, and she came also for a program, an older community organizers program. And she said very clearly and very articulately, she said, "I used to think because I was a poor person, I didn't have anything to contribute. I used to think because I didn't have a cell phone, I couldn't associate with people who had more than me. And now I've realized that we all have something to give." And she started working tirelessly part of the work is finding where's your inspiration. And hers was with the children and the AIDS orphans. And she started a daycare center for kindergarten. And she worked and she worked and she worked. And we were in relationship with a woman that some of you may know. She passed away recently, Dr. Florence Hibbler. And Florence kept coming back to Kufunda, and she met Anna when we went out to Risapa, and was so inspired that she organized funding for her to go to Nairobi and do the kindergarten Waldorf teachers training. And Anna, I mean, she was always an incredibly beautiful woman. She's maybe in her 60s now. But just this quiet, grounded, loving presence that's now learnt Waldorf and is now bringing that to children in the middle of literally nowhere, rural Risapa, outside Risapa, and beginning also to teach other women what she's learned. And so it's for me, what I bring today really is, I think it's something about, it doesn't have to be that complicated. I know the process of waking up is a long one, and yet there's something for me around trusting that each one of us has the spark. And even those of us in the so-called lost continent. So as we've done this work, one thing we saw really clearly has been that if our children keep going back to the same schools that are still very much just relics of a British school system, I think it's like UK education but 50 years ago, it wouldn't really serve them. And so a few years ago we started a Waldorf school, which was our way into this community. And something shifted when we opened up really to the children as well. So by realizing we needed to ensure that our children wouldn't have to do all the unlearning that we'd had to do, but that they could actually go straight, they brought something into our community. And so 2 years ago, my children were in class 3, and they had their farming and gardening main lesson, and the teacher asked them, what do you want to grow? And at Kufunda we grow a lot of food, so we assumed they were going to join and work in the fields, and they said, we would like a garden with flowers and fruit trees. And Kufunda is very functional. We'd been so functional. We'd been all about discovering ourselves, but then it was just, so that we could feed ourselves and we could. And somehow the aesthetics and the beauty, and I would almost say the finer aspects of the human spirit had not yet entered our African learning village. And it came in through the children. And so my son wanted roses, and someone else wanted marigolds, and someone wanted a mango tree. So it's a bit of a strange garden, but it's the children's garden at the very entrance of Kufunda. And I wanted to bring the children and the garden in, because I look at the children. We live about half an hour outside of Harare city, and some of you may have heard about what's happening in Zimbabwe at the moment. We have a violent response from our government to people beginning to stand up and say, enough. What will it take for us to be truly free? And so I look at what's happening in the city and the crackdown, and I have a sense that I'm looking into the past. I'm looking into the wounding. I'm looking into the souls that haven't found themselves, the souls that feel that maybe they're not enough. And then I turn and I look at our little rose garden and our children and their art and their crafts, their house building projects, and I have a sense that I'm looking into the future. And it's not a future that's going to be the same as the future of this place. And I think that's my invitation to you. I don't know how many of you will ever come to Africa, but there's something about arriving and meeting us as who we are, and then together we can begin to see what might what we bring, how might that enrich what is here? How might what is in India enrich what is here? In Brazil, in all these different places. There's something for me around the diversity and the meeting and the truly being willing to be surprised. And my half-Danish self is often humbled in Zimbabwe. Humbled by the generosity of spirit, by the love, by the patience. I'm the one that meets people, says good morning quickly, and then let's get on with business. And they stop and they take time. If someone needs help, endless time. And people joke about Africa as, not so good on time. But there's something about the presence to actually be with this other human being here and really be with them that I feel is one of the gifts, this heart gift of the continent that I come from. Steiner said, the healthy social life is found only when in the mirror of each soul the whole community finds its reflection. And when in the whole community the virtue of each one is living. And I have been wondering, if we could see this community almost as a global community. And what might it take for us to, in the mirror of each soul, to have the whole community find its reflection? And what might it take for the virtue and the gifts and the capacities of each one to live in the whole community? And I think my time is up, and I have a feeling to end with a song. Would that be okay? It's not an African song, but it's a song that I feel is worth, and there's something about meeting your hearts through my heart, and song can sometimes do that more easily than words. So I actually think it's a liberation song from the blacks in America. This ain't coming from no prophet, just an ordinary woman. When I close my eyes, I see just how this world could be if we all walked hand in hand. Do 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 do. When the last child cries for a crust of bread, when the last man dies for just words he has said, when there's shelter over the poorest head, then we shall be free. When the last thing you notice is the color of skin, when the first thing you look for is the beauty within, when the skies and the oceans are clean once again, then we shall be free. Oh, we shall be free. Oh, yeah. We shall be free. Have a little faith, stand tall, 'cause we shall be free. And when money talks for the very last time, and when no one walks just one step behind, when there's only one race, and that's mankind, oh yeah, then we shall be free. Oh yeah, then we shall be free. you. And I just realized I forgot to say one thing. We're hosting the All-African Anthroposophic Training at Kufunda Village in August this year. And you can find it allafricaanthroposophictraining.org on the internet. If any of you would like to come and see what our learning village is like and begin to fuse between the Africans, people will be coming from all over Africa to see how they're learning and embracing anthroposophy, then you would be very welcome. Thank you.